I blew his mind a little bit because there's a 5-pound box of Smarties in there. I want you to watch this, and then we'll begin. He set his face to go to Jerusalem, it says in one translation. He was determined to go. And we know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would like to say. We know that going to Jerusalem meant his crucifixion, his death. And yet he set his face to go and to do just that, to go to Jerusalem. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be following him along that path to Jerusalem just a little bit. It goes through several chapters. We're not going to do all of them, but for the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be looking at some of the lessons that he taught the people as he went along on that journey to Jerusalem. And today, we're going to be looking at the first lesson that he has, and that is the lesson that we need to remember, and that is to follow him. But we're going to start in an unusual place. I think it's interesting that this particular passage comes up now, the Sunday before the 4th of July, before our Independence Day, before we celebrate this act that we see here on the screen, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I have no idea if it actually looked like that, but that's the way it was painted. There wasn't anybody around with Instagram or Snapchat or any of those things back in those days. But if there had been, this is what we're led to assume that it looks like. 56 brave men signing the Declaration of Independence. Guys in, knee pants and white socks and powdered wigs and all that kind of stuff. Do you know what happened to those guys that signed that declaration? It was not an easy thing for them to do, to give their names to this document. Each one of them stepped forward to sign that document, and they vowed to support independence with their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. A very serious pledge. Basically what they were doing was declaring their becoming traitors to the British throne, to the crown. And we know that being a traitor comes with a high price. Loss of life, loss of property. Of those men that signed, 5 of those men were captured by the British, tortured and killed. The 12 of them had their homes ransacked, destroyed. 2 lost their sons in the war. 2 others had their sons taken prisoner. 9 of those men fought and died in the Revolutionary War. They signed and pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. 24 lawyers, 11 that were merchants, farmers, plantation owners, men that had something to lose. Not just their name, but everything. They stood to lose everything. And many of them did lose everything by doing what they did. They were willing to follow that cause with everything that they had. They knew the consequences, and they were willing to face them. Jesus is on a similar journey. He's about to go and to give himself completely to what he knows is right. The sacrifice for us. And so Luke portrays him as steadfastly going toward Jerusalem. Now, if you read through the different passages, he doesn't take a real direct route to Jerusalem, according to the way Luke writes this. But Luke is writing more for the stories than the places. He's writing for these things that Jesus is teaching us along the way. Sort of like in John, where he sits with his disciples that last night and gives them all of this wisdom. Now he's giving all of this wisdom, as Luke records it, on the journey to Jerusalem, the journey to his death. Oh my goodness, what happened there? I jumped way ahead. I'm lost now. There we go. I got a fat finger. He starts out with a man coming to him and saying, I'm ready to follow you. And he says something that's, it sounds kind of weird when you first hear it. He says, foxes have dens and birds have nests. But I don't have any of those things. Another man says, I'm going to follow you, but I need to do this. I need these things that have to be done. He said, I want to go back and bury my father. And Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. Now, we can kind of wiggle around those things and take them and say, well, he really meant this or he really meant that. But you know what? I think at that point in his life, he really meant what he said. This is a journey that has to be done now. We don't have time to wait, to stand around, to think about this, to debate this. We need to go and we need to do. Another one says, I'll follow you, but let me say goodbye to my family. And his answer finally is, if you put your hand to the plow and look back, you're not fit for the kingdom. If you're willing to get in and do the work, but you're looking back, you won't be able to do what God is calling you to do. So he challenges us, as well as his disciples and those who want to come and follow him, and says, are you ready to choose me? It's interesting. He asks us to choose him over security. I think back to those founders that signed that declaration. They chose to follow that path over their security. Every one of them could have said, nah, you know what, I'll support all this, but I'm not signing that thing. I'll give you some money now and again, and if things get real hard, you can come and hide in my barns and this and that, but seriously, let's not get crazy. But Jesus said, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to trust that God will take care of what you need. when he sent out his 72 to go and spread the gospel. One of the first mission outreaches of the church, you know, a church-wide mission outreach, 72 went out. And his instructions to them were, don't take anything more than the clothes you're wearing and go. Trust that God will provide for you. Pretty big trust to follow that leader. To say, God, I know you'll take care of me. I don't know how. I don't need to. I'll go. I'll follow you. I'll trust. He also calls us to choose the best over good. Jesus was a family person. He grew up in a family. He loved his mother. His brothers, even though they thought he was crazy for a while, all ended up being a part of his movement. He understood family, and he knew how important family was, but he also knew that there comes a time when we need to go and to do, and if that means that we leave our family, well, then that may need to be what we do. Family is good, but God's family is better. It's the best. As a matter of fact, when his mother and brothers thought he had kind of lost his mind, they showed up and his friends said, oh, your family, your mother and your brothers are outside. And he said, these who are here listening, this is my family. These are my mother and brother and sisters. And we know that they all ended up back together, but it's a challenge for us to look at Jesus and say, you know, even if this separates me from my family, I'm willing to follow you. It doesn't say we have to. It doesn't say our family has to be second or last or forgotten. It just means they can't stop us. They can't hinder us from doing what needs to be done. Those men that signed the Declaration of Independence, they signed that and put their families at risk. Many of them lost their entire wealth and all of their family. One man who hid for a year in the forest and in the caves and different places that he could find to hide came back to find that his wife had died and his children were all gone. He didn't know where they were. He died before he ever found where his family all ended up. Because he knew that the thing he was serving was so important. Jesus is impressing this now on the disciples and on us. What we do, what we stand for, what we believe in is important. He calls us to follow him. And as we follow, we need to remember that we don't stop being who we are. We just follow a leader. All of those men that followed the cause of freedom, they didn't stop being who they were. Some of them put it on hold for quite a while. Some of them gave it up, not by choice, really. I mean, it was taken from them, but they chose to allow that to happen. But Jesus calls us always to follow him. And sometimes that does mean sacrifice. Sometimes that does mean giving up the things that we love and care for. But other times it means that we follow him in everything that we do. You know, Christ does not call everyone to the same kind of work. We all have the same end goal, and that is to make disciples of Jesus Christ, to transform the world. That's the goal, or should be the goal, of every Christian. And we need to do that wherever we are, even at risk of our own personal comfort, and maybe even our own lives. So as we go out into the world, we're called to follow him, and we're called pastors, as farmers, as bankers, as shop owners, as retired people, as whatever it is we are. We're called where we are. We're called to put those things second and our call for Christ first. We're called to follow Him no matter who we are, no matter where we are, no matter what we do. He calls us to be His people. And not to look back and say, oh gosh, I wish this or I wish that. You know, I told you many times, I'm no farmer. But this thing I do know, that if you're plowing and you're not, and you don't have the auto steer, or whatever it's called, if you're steering it yourself and you're looking back like this, it's mighty hard to plow straight. It's mighty hard to do the job the way you should. You may be good at it, may not be impossible, but it's always better if you can see where you're going and not worry so much about where you've been. Christ calls us to that. Don't worry about where you've been. Worry about where you're going. Follow me. Don't worry about burying the dead. Don't worry about this. Just don't look back when you say you'll follow. Just follow. You know, we can't change our past, but we can start now and change our future. We can make following Jesus our priority and not worry about everything that went before. He stands and He calls us to follow Him, to come and do what needs to be done. And it sounds hard, right? I mean, that sounds hard, to just give everything up and follow Jesus. But He's made a promise to all of us. He made that promise to His disciples when He ascended to be back in heaven, when He gave them this impossible task, go and spread the gospel to the entire world. And He had 12, maybe more. The 12, the 11 were there, but there were probably more. But even if there had been 1,000 people there, to spread the gospel to the entire world was impossible. They couldn't do it. And yet that's what He told them to do. And He gave them this promise. I am with you always, to the very end of the age. He doesn't call us to do that alone. He calls us to do it with Him. That's when we celebrate Dependence Day. I wrote about that in the newsletter. Instead of independence, we depend on Jesus, on God's direction through Christ, through the Holy Spirit, to show us which way we need to go to follow Him. Nothing wrong with independence. And when we celebrated the 4th, we should celebrate with joy that those 56 men were willing to take that risk and secure for us those liberties that we now have. And we need to pray for our nation, as the video reminds us, because we need to be dependent on God, not on our wisdom, not on our brilliant minds, our courage, or any of those things, but on God. Because friends, the task we have is too hard for us to do in our own wisdom and strength and courage. But if we depend on Christ, if we depend on God's wisdom through Him, then there isn't anything that's too difficult for us. There isn't anything that's too hard for us to do when we allow ourselves to be dependent not on others, not on family, not on friends, not on any of the things within us, but on God through Jesus Christ. We take that dependence seriously. We could sign the declaration. We could take off and follow Christ to the cross on Calvary. We could go where we're uncomfortable, where we don't think we want to go, and share the gospel. We could talk to people that we're afraid of, that we don't know, that we don't want to associate and share the gospel. Not because we're such great people or we're such good Christians, but because we depend on Jesus Christ. So this Independence Day, as we celebrate, and we will, if you light off fireworks or you just sit around and take it easy and have a nice picnic with family and friends, remember that we do that because 56 men were willing to follow something that they knew was correct and believed in. And they set an example for all of us to trust what we know is right, what we've been taught since we were little till now, what we find in God's Word, what we learn through who Jesus is, to follow Him and to go where He leads us and to be dependent on Him. He called the first disciples with those simple words, "Follow me." He called all 12 with those words, "Follow me." On the trip to Jerusalem, He begins by calling, "Follow me." That call comes to us yet today. Hasn't changed in over 2,000 years. Follow me. Follow me. The question is, will we? The prayer is, we'll trust. We'll step out. We'll follow Him. And know that even as we give up those familiar things, those comforts that we know, even as we give up the things that are good but not the best, we'll be blessed as we follow Him. May that be our prayer this day, this week, as we celebrate this holiday that really is a celebration. Men willing to follow what was right and what they knew was correct. May they be at least one example for us. Follow me, Jesus said.